This is the query we're going to be running, and we're basically in index01 of 23.interface. And if we come back here, we can see that we're running a query on people, and we have our users, but we have a student type and they have ID, first name, role and year. And then we have staff that has ID, first name, role, but a difference of department. So they're very similar, but they have a few extra characters. And this is what we call an interface. So we'll copy this query here and put that back into here. Put that along here. And if we come in and actually have a look now at the type def. So firstly, we've got an enum. We've seen that before: grad status, undergrad, grad, postgrad. And we define our interface, which is a person that has ID, role and a first name. And here we basically have a type of student that implements a person. We have to copy these. We don't just start with what is different. And while one may think that's inefficient, the reason is these schemas should be self-defining. So the reason we do it here is we only do it once, whereas in our, it's more for saving time on our queries, not on the server side. And therefore when people come and look in here, they can actually see exactly what a person is, because this definition could be in another file somewhere else because of the way we merge schemas. So although we have to copy and paste and put this all here, we just do that the once. As we see in our query, we can basically really see that this is where we can basically then use on staff name. We can actually copy all of those across, so it's more on the client side rather than on the server side. So if we come back in here, we see a student implements the person type, which is ID, role, first name, but it has year and grad status. The staff has the same ID, role, first name and department. We do a query for users, and this returns us a person object. But when GraphQL resolves it, it doesn't know should it resolve it to a student or to a staff. And that's when we come down here. Well, we have our usual users here. When we come down here, we have to resolve what type of person is it. And we use the resolve type, and basically we're looking to resolve the type based on, for example, their role. Now you can define it on many different things. We saw in the unions how we saw something different, but in this case here, the reason I can resolve something different is they all have a role, and basically that role is either going to be staff or student, so that can actually contain the data in it. So when we come back up here, for example, on student, first name, role, we can resolve it based on the role. Unfortunately, the role will actually have whether it's staff or student. Now we could resolve it based on whether the property year exists, because the year is not the same in this one in staff. So as we saw in unions, when we're resolving, we have to look at something that's a difference between the two types. Fortunately here, the role contains the type, so this will return back either student or staff. And we can see back here, if we run this query and we look in here, we can see resolving person type as student, as staff. Fortunately, that comes back exactly as to what we need, because when we have our different types of student and staff, the type is the same as the role. But we could have done it by saying if the year property exists, resolve as student; if the department property exists, resolve as staff. That could be another way of resolving these two types. So interfaces and unions sort of similar. We have to resolve the type, and basically we see in our query here, we can say on student, give us back these fields. We could also put back here, we have an extra field up top here. What do we have? We have grad status, so let's put that one here. And let's copy this across and see how this one works. Control C, space down there, save, come across, do a new one, refresh, put it in here, take that off and run it. That works too, and we can see we get back grad, postgrad, depending on the enum value. So really, unions and interfaces are slightly similar. Union is a collection of related objects but with very different schemas. Interface is a collection of objects that have a very similar schema, and obviously closely related to, as we saw, person to staff or student. And we just need to tell type GraphQL exactly how we resolve it. It can either be that there's something in the actual field itself that gives it matches the actual type in terms of name. we had role and this matching, or it could be, as we saw in unions, where there's a difference that if the department exists it must be staff, whereas if year exists or grad status is, it must be a student, and then just return back the type name student, which we're seeing here. We're resolving the person type as a student or a staff.